C-SPAN's Book Notes, Sunday nights at 8.
Now, House Republican leaders on the September 11th Commission report and efforts to prevent future terrorist attacks. We hear from Speaker Dennis Hastert and Majority Leader Tom DeLay. Their comments are 35 minutes.
She made me tall today. Good afternoon, everybody. We're here to talk about terror on the run, in the caves of Afghanistan, on the side streets of small Spanish villages, in my own hometown of Columbus, Ohio. Terror is on the run. Across the world, hundreds of terrorists have been cornered or killed. Plots have been foiled, assets have been frozen, and one of the world's most notorious American-hating terrorists of all, Saddam Hussein, has been reduced to a prisoner behind bars. Today, Americans can be confident that the terrorists who declared war against us are now casualties of a different war. Their abilities are unquestionably weaker, their means are depleted, their direction from the top is much less clear, and the war on terror is stronger and more successful than ever before. President Bush, Republicans in Congress, and all Americans who know the price of inaction will continue to fight the war on terror until its threat is no longer. Terror is on the run, and from the way things look, there's a dead end down every road. The House Republican leadership and the chairman of jurisdiction are here to discuss this further. I give you Speaker Hastert. I don't know if you can stand there.
Can I scoot this over?
Sure?
Whoop, it's unscrutable. Inscrutable. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to say, read this report. It shows that we're at war with an implacable and a very dangerous enemy. It's an extremely important contribution to our understanding of what happened in the days leading up to the tragic events of September 11th. President Clinton is not to blame for these attacks. President Bush is not to blame for these attacks. Qaida is to blame for these attacks. We're at war with these religious fanatics and those terrorist states that support them. They hate Americans and they want to kill us. We must win this war. We can't negotiate with these terrorists. We can't hope that they go away. And we have to stop them before they strike again. We must use every weapon in our arsenal to win this war. We have made great progress thanks to the leadership of President Bush and some of these people who are gathered right here behind me. We took the fight to the terrorists in Afghanistan and Iraq. We strengthened our homeland defense. We strengthened anti-terrorist laws with the Patriot Act. We prepared ourselves for the worst-case scenario by passing important legislation on first responders. Just yesterday, President Bush signed the BioShield bill. We will not weaken in our resolve to win this war and to protect our citizens. I want to thank Governor Tom Keene and former Representative Lee Hamilton and the entire Commission for their important work. We will look at their recommendations carefully. I will ask our committee chairman to hold hearings on these recommendations over the next several months so that we can act on them as quickly as possible. As a nation, we must unite in our resolve to defeat this enemy and protect the American way of life for our children and our grandchildren. Thank you.
I'd like to say as we enter this long break period, really with both of the conventions on either end of it, we do so understanding that America is still the biggest target in the world because we so contradict everything the terrorists say is the only way you can live in the world. We've come together, we live together in freedom, we live together with great differences in our society, and we've accommodated those differences and moved forward. As both Lee Hamilton and Tom Keene told us the other day in our briefing, we clearly have done lots of things right since September the 11th. And many plans that appeared to be in the making have been foiled in that period of time. Many things that we thought could be in the process of happening haven't happened. That doesn't mean that we're totally secure from terrorism in this country. We are a big target-rich society. Now, basically what we've done is choose to go to the root of terrorism, to go to countries that gave sanctuary, to go to the heart of the terrorists themselves in Afghanistan and now be in Iraq. And clearly those countries have become, particularly Iraq, have become huge magnets for the forces and resources of terrorism. Doesn't mean we're secure from threats as we approach the summer. It does mean that we are clearly making the terrorists pay a huge price. We had just a few weeks ago President Yawar, the new president of Iraq, in my office here in the Capitol, and about 36 members were able to meet with him. He, the Prime Minister, others who have stepped forward to lead in that country, in a country where 100 city council members have been killed in the last 6 months, clearly are stepping forward to stand for freedom against the despots that have been in control in Iraq, to try to secure a foothold for freedom and democracy in a part of the world where neither have ever been able to flourish. This is an important place for us to be. We are clearly fighting the terrorists there. Doesn't mean we might not have other events and activities occur here, but this is an important commitment. We've made it, as the Speaker said. Reading that report shows the kinds of things we need to do as we move forward. You know, the world, I think, in many ways divides its view of terrorist and terrorist activities on September the 11th. The mindset before September the 11th is not the same as the mindset after September the 11th. Our view of what terrorists were willing to do, their lack of appreciation for life, their lives or the lives of others, the heinous and in so many ways cowardly things that they have been willing to do and plan to do are more evident in our world today than they were before that, and we're doing everything we can to do something about it.
Thank you, Congressman Blunt. I'm Chris Cox, the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee from the state of California. And as Roy has pointed out, as Deborah has pointed out, as Speaker Hastert has observed, this report, the 9/11 Commission report, comes at a very propitious time. We are poised not only to continue the reforms that have already been undertaken in both the executive and legislative branches since September 11, 2001, but also to enact new reforms. And there's much in this volume that we can study and infer lessons from. And I know that we will do so. Already, the 9/11 Commission report has gained much public attention and put the country in the position of strongly supporting actions by the executive and actions by the legislative to take us further. I think this report represents the final nail in the coffin of the old stovepipe separation, the old stovepipe divisions between law enforcement and intelligence for pursuit of terrorists. The Patriot Act, strongly endorsed in this volume, undid the separation of law enforcement and intelligence sharing that has been so essential. Likewise, we have to knit together operations that are undertaken domestically by the FBI and by agencies such as the CIA overseas if we're to pursue terrorists that are operating against the United States from abroad. As we now know from this volume, the trail of the 9/11 terrorist plotters included California, included Southern California, ran from Los Angeles to San Diego, and as we learned from Chapter 7 in the footnotes in this book, through my home of Orange County. Deborah Price mentioned Columbus, Ohio. The truth is that across America, we have to fight now terrorism on our own home soil, in our backyard. That is one of the lessons that we will also infer from this very important report. As chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, I have been focused heavily on improving intelligence sharing, a fundamental purpose of this new department. Better intelligence sharing and better information sharing was one of the core reasons, if not the core reason, for Congress's establishment of the Department of Homeland Security in the wake of September 11th. Our federal government has made tremendous progress instituting new policies, including in this area, to secure our homeland. After the 9/11 attacks, President Bush sent his proposal to create a new cabinet-level agency to the Congress, and on November 25th, 2002, the President signed the Homeland Security Act into law, creating what is now the third largest cabinet department and merging together 22 previously distinct and separate agencies of our government. In the United States Congress, the Speaker of the House established a separate subcommittee of the Committee on Appropriations to make sure that this new cabinet department would have focused oversight and a separate authorizing and oversight committee in the Select Committee on Homeland Security. These are important reforms because remember what's at stake here. This department came to life just over 1 year and a few short months ago when more than $50 billion in assets and 180,000 employees were merged together. This consolidation not only represents the most significant reorganization of the federal government in 50 years, but it transforms the federal government to focus on this new single overriding mission of preventing terrorism and protecting America and Americans from its consequences. Securing our homeland relies on the federal government's ability to work both quickly and effectively to implement groundbreaking new policies and to define a new partnership that relies heavily on intelligence and information linking all levels of government and the private sector. In this new world, as this report makes abundantly clear, there is no room for business as usual. That is why the Congress very shortly will move H.R. 3266, the Faster and Smarter Funding for First Responders Act, which is in the final stages of development in 4 committees of the House of Representatives. Funding based on threat, based on risk, based on our best intelligence should be the norm. This legislation incorporates threat analysis conducted by the Department of Homeland Security and the entire federal government directly into the first responder grant-making process. Finally, let me just point out how much has been accomplished in a very short period of time since the new Department of Homeland Security has been stood up. We have installed explosive detection systems, advanced checkpoint X-ray devices, and explosives trace detection systems at the nation's 448 commercial airports. We've implemented U.S. Visit, the biometric-based entry-exit program. We have conducted terrorism vulnerability assessments at every major port in the United States. We've implemented the Container Security Initiative, which pushes our inspection of dangerous cargo back up the supply chain to the megaports around the world. We've installed radiation detectors for United States air, land, and seaports to check for nuclear weapons or radioactive materials that can be used to make dirty bombs. We've installed counter-surveillance equipment at chemical plants around the country and conducted risk assessments at 50 of the most hazardous chemical plants in the country so far and built buffer security plans around the top 360 plants. We provided $27 billion to our nation's first responders, an increase of over 1,000% since September 11th. Just as important as our domestic security plans fighting the war here at home, we have taken the war to the terrorists. Our Chief Deputy Whip, Eric Cantor, is going to speak to the success that we have had in dismantling al-Qaida and in disrupting terrorist training camps.
Thank you, Chris. Good afternoon. After the 9/11 terrorist attacks, Americans were challenged to begin thinking the unthinkable. And we here in Congress, and working in conjunction with the leadership of the administration under President Bush, began to work at figuring out how it was we were going to operate in this new world. And if you look at the facts, there are irrefutable that steady progress has been made against the terrorists in the war against terror. 3 years ago, there were 4 nations that were operating as pits for terrorists to train and operate and from which to launch their missions. And Afghanistan and Iraq and Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. In Afghanistan, al-Qaida was training and sending out thousands of terrorists. It was ruled by the Taliban, one of the most backward and brutal regimes in modern history. And with the protection of the Taliban, al-Qaida and its associates trained, indoctrinated, and sent forth the thousands of killers to set up terrorist cells around the world in dozens of countries, including ours. Pakistan had a significant al-Qaida presence. Al-Qaida was active and recruiting there. Pakistan was not seriously opposed. Pakistan served as a transit point for al-Qaida, terrorists leaving Afghanistan on missions of murder. The United States had imposed sanctions on Pakistan because of their nuclear program, and there was a concern that Islamic extremists might take over a military armed with nuclear weapons. 3 years later, under the leadership of this president, and the leadership in this Congress, in Afghanistan, the terrorist camps are closed and Osama bin Laden is on the run. A new government has been established under President Hamid Karzai. A constitution has been written, and free elections will be held this fall. A nation is being rebuilt, and a terrorist threat has been removed, and the American people are safer. Pakistani forces are rounding up terrorists on their border and working with us. President Musharraf has become a friend, providing support for our operations, helping us capture Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the operational planner of the 9/11 attacks. Pakistan is now an ally of ours in the war on terror, and Americans are safer for that. Saudi Arabia is now working closely with the United States to root out al-Qaida. Since 9/11 and the attacks in Riyadh, the Saudi government has been working hard to shut down the facilitators and financial supporters of terrorism. The government has captured or killed many of the first-tier leaders of the al-Qaida organization in Saudi Arabia. And because Saudi Arabia has joined the war on terror, the American people are now safer. Thank you. And I believe I will turn over the podium to our Majority Leader, Tom DeLay.
Thank you. Has everybody else spoke?
No.
I'm the first? Well, you should be the first. Oh, okay. Thank you. The release of today of the 9/11 Commission report provides America another opportunity to assess our progress in the war on terror for over the last 3 years. For 8 years in the 1990s, international terrorism was at war with us. The World Trade Center bombing, Khobar Towers, the African embassies, the USS Cole, and we treated it like jaywalking. Terrorism is not a quality of life crime. It is a threat to the future of the civilized world and the freedoms that make this country what it is. During the 1990s, America's intelligence capacity was crippled, and our international credibility was undermined by our refusal to take the terrorist threat seriously enough. 9/11 was supposed to change all that. And the question our nation now faces is whether we want to return to the 90s law enforcement approach to terror, or whether we want to reaffirm our commitment to fight and win the war on terror. Whether we admit it or not, we are at war. Our only choice is whether we fight it in Baghdad or in Brooklyn. Republicans are committed to fighting and winning the war on terror with the same resolve that this nation felt on September the 11th, 2001, by taking the fight to our enemies. We will win this war, continue to rebuild our intelligence infrastructure, and keep national security at the top of the national agenda where it belongs.
Hi, Duncan Hunter, Chairman of the Armed Services Committee. This president, backed by the full might of America's armed forces, undertook a very aggressive posture, a very aggressive campaign against terror after 9/11, and perhaps that was the most important dimension of this nation's response. And the men and women of our uniformed services pursued terrorists aggressively and took them on and killed them in places where the terrorists thought they would never have a problem, where they would never be bothered. We had the 10th Mountain Division taking them on at 10 and 12,000 foot mountain ranges in Afghanistan, killing them at close ranges in rifle pits. We had special operators who have really come to the fore in the war against terrorism, taking them on in caves, in hideouts, using a combination of low-tech and high-tech. And in Iraq, we have now 138,000 personnel working on this handover of not only the government but also the military, making this handover going along, although it's tough and it's hard and it's arduous, I think moving successfully toward a successful conclusion. If we succeed in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I think we will, and I think we're also succeeding to a large degree in Libya, although the jury is certainly still out there, as manifested by this turnover by the Libyans of a lot of their nuclear program equipment that took place when they gave us shipments of that equipment in January of this year. If we do that successfully, we will have neutralized 3 very major bases of terrorism: Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya. That's a product of an aggressive American posture led by an American president who didn't back down, who didn't wait until he had consensus and unanimity among all the nations of the world, but moved out, showed great leadership in a very difficult situation. And I think that's one aspect that we need to focus on. There's not going to be a surrender on the battleship Missouri in this war against terror. This war against terror is going to take a long time. We're going to have difficult spots. We're going to have casualties. It's going to be rough, it's going to be tough, and it's going to take the very best from our men and women, not only those who wear the uniform of the United States, but the thousands of men and women who are in the intelligence services and serve this country so well. We have to have patience. And this is not going to be a war that is over quickly. It's going to take a long time. And there's always going to be some terror activity bubbling to the fore in various parts of the world. So we have to be shaped to take it on. Now, one thing we've done with this administration, I think very successfully, is to move special operators to the fore. That is to give them better equipment, to give them better ability to insert and to exit, better training and to proliferate them, and to give them control in these areas of operation where the CENTCOM or where the CINC, the commander-in-chief of a certain sector, not only is served by special operators such as General Abizaid and CENTCOM, but he also serves the special operators himself with the full force and effect of all of the military people stationed in that area. So we're moving aggressively. We have good leadership. We are shaping our forces to not only handle conventional warfare, which we have to be able to handle at all times, but we're also shaping our forces to win the war against terror. And so lastly, I would simply reiterate that along with rebuilding our military, and we're going to spend over $100 billion more this year on defense than we spent in the mid-1990s. We are rebuilding our military. We also have to rebuild intelligence. And the one thing that's absent in this 9/11 report is any instance in which we had American operatives or we had assets of American operatives. That means informants, people who would talk to their handlers or to American intelligence agents or officers who were in the room when these decisions were made to strike Americans. We did not have people in the room. That is, we did not have the human intelligence that we so desperately need. And in the 1990s, we cut 20% of our intelligence operatives, our officers, and we lost 40% of our assets. So to some degree, we'd be analogous to Ford Motor Company cutting some 40% of its dealerships and then wondering why business isn't as good as it used to be. You have to have that human intelligence dimension, and Porter Goss has worked extremely well with this administration to start that rebuilding, a very important element to winning the war against terror. Thank you.
Thank you, Duncan. I'm Porter Goss from Southwest Florida, Florida's 14th Congressional District. I'm also chairman of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. Our remit is the National Foreign Intelligence Program. That is, the things Duncan was just referring to, we call them spies. He calls them informants. In fact, the whole purpose of our intelligence business, the core mission of intelligence, is close-in access to the plans and intentions of the mischief makers so we can get their plans and stop them before the mischief happens. That's the purpose of our foreign intelligence program. Obviously, it's supplemented by a lot of technology, a lot of expertise, and a lot of people working hard and taking great risk in a great many places. I think this is an extremely important contribution to the debate in America today. Those of us who are involved in the foreign intelligence program, and Congress who has that have the responsibility, say that what happened on 9/11/01 is that the audience changed. And it did dramatically. It was a terrible price to pay to get the audience. We need to do some reform, and we need to do some reinvesting. And this is a very readable document. It puts a face on how terrorists operate and what goes on in their deranged minds and why they are going to do the things they can do and how they can do them. It educates us, and people should read this and understand. And we're taking this seriously. Actually, we're ahead of the curve on some of the recommendations here, which is the good news, and we will follow through on some of the other recommendations and give them close consideration. We are in a global war on terror. It's not just Iraq. It's not just Iran. It's every place. It's in the Philippines. It's in Indonesia. You name an alley, you name a place where people are conspiring to help terrorists, to give them safe haven, to give them money, to give them false travel documents, to do any number of things to support them. We are there fighting this war on terror. We do not have enough troops right now. We do not have enough eyes and ears out there, and we need to get those done. That's part of the reform that is going to come. The good news, and it is good news, and I think this implies it very well, is that we've learned some critical lessons, and we are winning the war on terror. We are safe, as this book says, but we are not safe enough. We have more to do, and we have, frankly, good people doing it, and I thank President Bush for his leadership and his very strong team led by Speaker Hastert. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, the report says congressional oversight for intelligence and counterterrorism is now dysfunctional, and it calls on the Congress to set up either a joint committee on intelligence or two House and Senate committees that would combine authorizing and appropriation authorities in one committee. Do you endorse that idea?
Well, we're going to look at the recommendations. We haven't endorsed any of the recommendations at this point. We'll have hearings, as I said in my statement. We will look at the ramifications of all those things. One of the things we've done in Homeland Defense, for instance, is put the authorization on Homeland Defense, which is a lot of the anti-terror stuff and the implementation of it, in a select committee, and done just as they said, and put the chairman of the other committees on board. That may work, that may not. We're testing the waters right now in actually doing it. There are other things that said that we ought to have a joint House and Senate committee in doing this. I wanted to look into that very carefully because we do a lot of work in the House. We have a hard time getting any work out of the Senate, and I'm just not sure how that would work out. So there's a lot of things that they have said. I said to establish committees to look at it. One of the things I said a long time ago when we implemented this commission is that we wanted to get the results back as quickly as possible, and I made an effort to try to get these results out this spring. That didn't happen because I thought we would have had enough time to have the hearings and actually move legislative action. As you know, we have a short period of time left, and I'm not sure that we can do all the hearings and all the testing of what these recommendations are and then actually move forward with the legislation. But we're going to move forward and get done what we can.
Mr. Speaker, if you could pick one of the recommendations, though, and go with it before the end of the session, what would it be, or anybody?
I beg your pardon?
If you could pick one of the recommendations to rush through before the end of the session.
Well, let me just say, we're not going to rush through anything. We're going to make sure that we look at this carefully. We've implemented a lot of these things even before this commission report has come out. Anything that we're going to do is going to be deliberate and not rushed. We're going to make sure that it really solves problems.
Mr. Speaker, let me quantify this for a second. Using the State Department numbers, in 2003 there were 190 acts of international terrorism. 2002 there were just 8 more. This year, or 2003, 307 killed, 1,593 wounded. 35 Americans were killed in 15 separate incidents, 82 anti-U.S. attacks. If you look at 2004, the numbers will probably go higher because of Madrid, Saudi Arabia, and if you include most of the 900 soldiers who were not killed by Iraqi army regulars, but by insurgents. How do you define for winning this war?
Well, I mean,
how do you quantify it?
Quantify it is that we've turned this over to a government that's actually working to be a democratic government. So we've changed actually the face of Iraq. We have terrorists from all over the world in Iraq that have decided to make that their battleground, in a sense, a holy battleground. And we're trying to turn that over and turn those people back. They aren't the government of Iraq, or even very few of them are the vestiges of the government of Iraq. These are international terrorists that have moved there. We need to stabilize that. We need to make an effort to do that. It has to be a cooperative effort with the Iraqi government, and I think we're winning that fight.
Mr. Speaker, the Commission this morning pushed emphatically for the Congress to act in a bipartisan fashion. They placed blame for this squarely across all officials of the federal government of this and former administrations, yet in this press conference you seem to be talking about what the great things Mr. Bush and you guys have done and the terrible things that happened in the 90s, what should the American people expect in terms of bipartisanship?
Well, I think we'll have bipartisanship. This is a bipartisan commission. That's what we set it up. And we will move forward. And bipartisan happens on both sides of the aisle, in case you didn't know. And we will be moving. We're going to have our committee structure, which happens to be bipartisan, move forward and, first of all, look into these recommendations, not in haste, but to look at them in depth, and then on a bipartisan basis, move through the process and get the results that we can.
Mr. Speaker,
yes.
I know you said you don't want to rush anything, but you've had almost 18 months to look at the work of the Select Homeland Security Committee. Are you willing to make that a permanent committee, as the Commission suggests?
Well, you know, we're going to, whether it's a permanent committee, select committee, whether we keep the ranking and chairman of all the other committees on board, it's something that we're going to have to reevaluate at the end of this year, and we're in the process of doing that now. Chairman Cox will be an integral part of that examination.
Are you willing to change or back a change in the formula for funding for Homeland Security so it's not, does not become a pork barrel project?
I'm going to defer that to the chairman of intelligence. He works with that every day. He has some ideas about how that would happen. And you said intelligence, or you said Homeland? I'm sorry. Let Mr. Cox come forward. Chris, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
As you know, making sure that we move from the old pre-9/11 political formulas for distributing grants to law enforcement and emergency personnel we now call first responders, and move towards a threat-based system has been the main message of several House committees. In fact, every House committee that has looked at this legislation, it is now favorably reported, the Faster and Smarter Funding for First Responders Act, from every committee to which it's been referred in the House, and I'm very, very hopeful that very soon that will be on the House floor. There is agreement on that general principle that I dare say is both bipartisan and nearly unanimous, that we can do better than mechanical formulas such as how many senators are there from your state, or how many people live here, and use the product of billions of dollars that we spend on intelligence to determine terrorist capabilities and intentions, and also to study our own vulnerabilities, and at the intersection of those two, place that funding, making sure while we're at it that there are minimum essential capabilities for every jurisdiction in America. That's the Faster and Smarter Funding for First Responders Act. We are this close to having it on the House floor. In fact, in the last 24 hours, we've reached, I think, agreement on the last remaining item, so that should be eligible for consideration by the House when we come back after this brief recess for the two conventions.
If you could also address how difficult it's been to have your portfolio and deal with all the variety of turf wars and jurisdictions of the different committees, and whether or not you would like to see a more streamlined process and budget authority.
Let me say that nothing in my 18 years in Washington and 16 years in Congress has been more enjoyable than interacting with my fellow chairmen and ranking members who all serve on the Homeland Security Committee.
Last question.
Chairman Goss, could you respond to the Commission's statement that oversight of intelligence was dysfunctional or still is?
I'm so glad you asked the question, because I've actually written a rather extensive press release, and I'm waiting for Ms. Harmon to sign off it so we can say it's bipartisan. I think that the observation was directed to the institutional organization of the way we do our oversight. Their recommendation actually goes to combining the committees, as we did the joint inquiry of the 9/11, as Senator Graham and I worked together with our two committees as a unit. They felt it would be more efficient. I don't think that anybody thinks the United States Congress is the most efficient place in the world. It is meant to be a deliberative representative body, at least on our side. And I think we do that very well. We are not in the executive function of running the intelligence business. Our responsibility for the national foreign intelligence business comes down to two requirements: provide resources and provide oversight. I believe we've done as good a job as we could do providing the resources, with the extraordinary help of Duncan Hunter, whose wisdom and deference to us on intelligence matters has been extraordinary. And I have to say the same about Bill Young and Jerry Lewis, the appropriators we've worked with, both of whom have been on the committees. So we're not having a very big problem in that area over here. What I think the issue is, in terms of the oversight, is that we need a more vigorous oversight to correct some of the problems that exist in the executive branch. And you do get very quickly into problems that are what I will call separation of powers. For instance, if there is an ongoing investigation in the Department of Justice involving somebody of interest to the intelligence community, we're asked to stand in line and wait because we don't want to contaminate the prosecution. So there are things like that that we could improve upon very clearly. Now, one of the things we knew was the stovepipe problem between the FBI and the CIA. It's been talked about. It was one of the successes we've had with the Patriot Act, was breaking that firewall down and getting those people to begin to talk to each other. Those are very important steps. So I agree we can always improve our oversight and we should always keep working at it. But I will say one thing. There is no country in the world, none, not one, anywhere, that has got better oversight of its national foreign intelligence program than the United States of America. And for proof of that, I will tell you that we have other countries coming to us, asking us how we do it and learning from us. And those countries include established allies like the United Kingdom, that just fairly recently, within the last decade, has set up their own oversight after chatting with us at length. Canada, Australia. We have participated with parliamentarians and jurists in those countries to help them create an oversight. Our oversight process has been evolutionary since 1947 under the National Security Act, when we set up our oversight process as a safeguard for the American people. It works, it's evolved, and since the Church-Pike Commission, it has become very formalized and perhaps too formalized. And I think it is time to take a look at it. And that is one of the reasons why I say read this book and get engaged in the reform activity, because we are talking about that. But in terms of all of the oversight, advice, and guidance and help and the inquiries we've had around the globe from evolving nations and trusted allies who have been around a long time, there's no other place to go. We may not be perfect, but we're the best that's available.
Thank you very much.
What's this step?
Gil Klein, Media General Newspapers. Mr. Hoyer was in here earlier, almost had terrible running on him, saying that this has been a do-nothing session of Congress. He blamed Republicans for being divided and not being able to provide any leadership and not being able to pass anything, especially the budget resolution. How do you respond?
It's very easy to respond. If you take all the things that we have done over the last 10 years, and most importantly this Congress, and compare them to any year in the Democratic majority, you will find, we tend to forget that we have pushed the envelope. We have been the leaders in this country of all kinds of policy changes, from tax relief to regulatory relief to completely redesigning the Medicare system into a quality care system for seniors. We have an agenda, and they have no agenda. Their only agenda is to constantly hold press conferences calling us a do-nothing Congress.
Yeah, on the whole question of
frankly, it's pathetic and ludicrous.
On the budget resolution that hasn't been able to get passed.
It hasn't stopped us from passing it. Budget resolution is not law. It is a good tool for us to use to restrain spending, but it means nothing. What is important is the appropriations bills. We're about to finish our 11th bill, holding the line for the first time in my 20 years to level spending, non-defense lines, Homeland Security spending, and versus the Democrats, when they were in the majority, spent with abandon.
And they say there's a split between the deficit reduction Republicans and the tax reduction Republicans.
It's ridiculous. It's called in-family conversation, trying to grow the vote and come to a consensus on where we should be headed. We've been doing that for 10 years.
That is certainly part of the act. Now, you're talking about reform of oversight. There are two separate pieces to reform. One is oversight of the way we do. One is reform over how we do oversight, and one is reform of how the community is. Okay?
Right.
Both of those are on the table.
So what do you?